What is the true meaning of salvation from an esoteric perspective, or from a spiritual perspective? Now, I'm not going to try to say why the meaning of salvation from the typical religious perspective of any religion, why that is not quite correct. I'm going to instead try to explain what it means from an esoteric perspective. First of all, salvation. Salvation from what? What needs to be saved? The nature of the soul is changeless. It doesn't change. What the soul seeks to do, one of the things that the soul seeks to do, one of the ways it evolves, and I will just remind here that the word soul means pure consciousness. That's one of its meaning, pure consciousness. So, one of the ways the soul evolves or grows or becomes more capable is through expansion. So it seeks to become more of what it already is. In this sense, it's not really changing, it's growing very much like a light. A small light or big light, it's still just light. There's no change in nature here. So, and this is why we call sometimes accomplished spiritual states of enlightenment. Well, that's kind of what it means here. So, salvation. Salvation from what? Since the soul does not change. And the soul, in its kind of purity, in its pure state, in its natural state, does not need to be saved and is not in danger of anything. So, who is to be saved if it's not the soul? Well, since one of the chief characteristics of the soul is expansion, there is a situation, well, the situation that all spirituality seems to want to tackle is the soul in incarnation. So, the soul in incarnation lives under a condition that many traditions have called many things, but basically it lives under the condition where it is under the delusion of being the incarnated self. So I am this body. I am these emotions. I am these thoughts. I am that ego, or I am that personality. But the soul is not that. The soul is beyond all that. But in incarnation, again, it is under the condition where the forces that make up this whole realm that some traditions have called Samsara, the forces that make up this whole realm are kind of encasing the soul. And the soul, or pure consciousness in its expansion, must over time and over many lifetimes grow or evolve very slowly until such a time as it is more potent or more powerful, if you will, or capable to know itself as it is while in incarnation, instead of not knowing itself as it is and believing it is those bodies, this temporary physical body and this temporary impermanent and mortal psyche. Again, the soul is not that. Salvation, in a sense, means that the soul is no longer lost to these forces which seek to completely dominate and imprison the soul or pure consciousness into their realms for their goals. In other words, the forces that we can call in general the forces of materiality, the forces which make up all the matter, all the energies that exist on this physical plane and also on the astral and the lower mental plane, the plane of the psyche, all of these forces in total are what we can call the forces of materiality, which are not the soul again. Salvation means that the soul knows itself as it is, even though it is incarnated in these realms. So salvation is not something that you experience after death. It can be, in a sense, but the true meaning means salvation happens when you are on earth, because if you are completely out of incarnation, then there's nothing to hinder soul existence. Nothing. But the incarnated consciousness can stay stuck for several lifetimes and several cycles, planetary cycles even, in this condition where it is stuck and more or less a slave of those forces which are different from its own true nature. So, authentic spirituality, one of the goals is to teach core principles, practices, knowledges which will help you free your own consciousness from the shackles of what those forces do to your consciousness. It's very hard while in incarnation to realize what is the nature of our own soul, what is the nature of our own consciousness. Outside of understanding or believing, conceptually speaking, having a conceptual understanding of what is the soul, that's not really the same thing as a realization of what the soul is. If there is a realization of the nature of the soul, this is something that's beyond conceptual understanding. It's not the same thing at all. Someone can be, especially in the past, someone could be completely uneducated but fully enlightened, unable to explain really to others what is the soul, or unable to explain complex, spiritual concepts and phenomena or truths. Someone can be fully enlightened but also completely uneducated, unable to read. It's possible, which goes to show that spiritual realization is not the same thing as spiritual knowledge or spiritual understanding. It's very easy today with the quantities of books and the very real possibility of becoming very much learned in a spiritual sense, meaning becoming very much learned about all kinds of spiritual stuff, but not being enlightened at all, for that matter. And so it is very easy to become some kind of fake guru, a fake spiritual instructor. Even if one has a lot of very good intentions, that doesn't mean that one has the capacity to really teach spirituality in a way that would be able to lead others towards their own salvation, meaning to lead others towards their own full spiritual realization, because one who's not spiritually realized cannot lead others to spiritual realization. You have to be realized to do that. And very few, very, very few spiritual superstars or spiritually known people who are known for writing books or giving talks about spirituality are actually realized. Those are very, very rare. Very rare. And I'm not saying that the people who do that and who are not spiritually realized have bad intentions. They probably don't. They probably have very good intentions. And I actually respect what they do. I respect their work. And I admire some of them, even. And to their credit, probably, most of them probably do not pretend to being spiritually realized. So I really have no fault to pin on them. But some do. And on those, well, let them do what they do. And I guess we will see what are the fruits that their work will yield. But in the meantime, again, on the subject of salvation, spiritual salvation, it has more to do with an energetic condition of consciousness, which is, even though in incarnation, remains fully free of all the attachments and all the limitations that come with the ordinary condition of being in incarnation. So the soul is no longer, the soul in incarnation again is no longer lost to its own nature. It's no longer lost to its real reality or real condition, or to the fundamental core aspects of its being. These are fully realized, these are fully known, There is no mystery there, or there is almost no more mystery there. And the soul, even though in incarnation, so the consciousness in incarnation, knows itself as it is and has its eyes turned towards divine stuff, the realms that are above that of the soul. So the realms of the gods, some would call those. Is there such a thing? I cannot demonstrate it. No one can really demonstrate that. But for those who have done the work and have put necessarily enormous amounts of right efforts towards that, the existence of something that we call the realm of the soul or the kingdom of God or the realms of the gods, plural, those become obvious realities. Obvious. There is no need for proof there, because the need for proof comes from the lower concrete mind, which cannot recognize anything but what it can recognize, basically. That which is beyond the mind is outside of its reach or of its grasps, and it will never recognize it. The lower concrete mind, in this sense, is a very effective trap for the soul, if the soul is too identified with the mind. When the soul is too exaggeratedly identified with the lower concrete mind, meaning the thinking mind, meaning the conceptual mind, the mind that has opinions and beliefs, when the soul is too identified with the lower concrete mind, what does the mind say? The principle of the mind is, what does it say? Or what's its basic affirmation? It says something like, I am the only God. You will worship no one but me, and there is no one above me. This is an affirmation of the lower concrete mind. It's not an affirmation of any true God anywhere. That will probably shock some people, but there is no such true God who will affirm that they are the sole and only God. That's impossible. After all, the universe is infinite, or at least it looks infinite, or perhaps it is like the soul, in an everlasting expansion. There is no true limitation to life, to light, to space, to time. How can any entity anywhere say that there's nothing above them? Only the deluded conceptual mind says that. Only the deluded conceptual mind says that there's nothing above him or it when it becomes too powerful. And this is perhaps why, to achieve a true form of spiritual salvation, one must become freer and freer of the lower concrete and conceptual mind. It will appear eventually and very quickly as a very real limitation upon the soul, which will strive to experience and know all kinds of things in existence that are beyond the mind and which are completely impossible to understand from a mind perspective. The soul can know. The soul can understand. The soul can do a lot of things beyond the mind, beyond the lower concrete mind. Which is why it has been said that to know God, you have to go through the nature of the soul. You cannot go to God through the mind. The mind will not lead you to God or to the divine. Only the soul will do that. Only the nature of the soul can approach the realms of the divine. The mind cannot. The mind is a limitation to that. So again, salvation also means detachment, or a form of renunciation of all beliefs. All of them. All beliefs, opinions, and, knowledges eventually form a limitation to the expansion of the soul. Of course, you need knowledge. You need to understand stuff. You need that to function as a human being in a human society. But these, if they are at these knowledges, if they are at the rightful place, they are not obstacle for the expansion of the soul. They only become obstacles when the soul is so identified with the lower concrete mind that it thinks it is the lower concrete mind and accepts these limitations, increases them, and encases itself within them. And a mind prison is a very tough thing to break. A very, very tough thing to break. Mind prisons. It takes a lot of time to get out of that. A fanatic will not be convinced of anything, even if one tries to convince them of thinking otherwise with a perfect argumentation, a perfect analysis. But for the fanatic caught in the mind prison, it's not going to work. And religious fanatics, you can be sure that their incarnated soul has not been saved. And it cannot be saved by any outside kind of help. Spiritual realization is an inner realization of the nature of the soul, of the nature of one's own soul.